Uh, we're having another nonfiction deep dive. This is video number 6 for White Fragility, and it covers up to page 76, which is about the halfway point in the Kindle book. And there's about halfway. So I took a lot of notes on this part. So let's talk about the notes. Hopefully I do it justice. So the idea that racism is not a white problem puts too much responsibility on black people to carry the burden of racism. The brutal, explicit violence by white people is never seen, like on television or in the media, as white people being violent. It's usually seen by external, like the reasons for it is like external factors. White kids that get in trouble, like the judge or the people will talk about it being external reasons why they're in trouble. You know, like they come from a bad home, they're going through a rough patch, things like that. But when black and Latinx youth are a part of crime, a lot of the judges and individuals talk in coded words that it's an internal issue, that person just is like just bad almost internally or defaultly, and they don't come out and right out and say that, but the words are coded in that way. Race alone helps establish our innocence. Whites are seen as more innocent. Privilege is not just something handed to white people. It was given to them by the system of racism. Whites need to stop asking blacks about race unless they have a close relationship with that person. People of color have been telling us about racism for a long time, but it is usually dismissed. So, and this is one thing that I definitely have learned from this, is if you're not paying attention to what black people are saying normally, if you're not reading the books, putting in the work, and then something happens and you're asking your black friend or black coworker about things, it's your responsibility to educate yourself. Like, they don't have to educate you. Urban poor whites have more relationships with people of color, but social upward mobility is still desired, which means moving into more white neighborhoods. So basically, the whiter the neighborhood equals the more desirable the outcome. Schools in the U.S. are vastly unequal. White people in power just hasn't made much progress to fix this. In fact, the book even says that they want to keep it that way so that their own schools stay the way they are. Urban and low test scores are code for not white. White people are taught that we lose nothing of value through racial segregation, especially if we see white segregation as good. So there's a large portion of the book where it talks about white segregation and how white people can go through their entire life and not have like a black friend or have black influences in their life, and nothing would happen, and they would see that as okay. Like, they wouldn't even recognize that happened. White people didn't have a choice to be socialized into racism. They just were. Okay, so after the Civil Rights Movement, racism was seen as isolated and extreme acts of prejudice just because of race. So where it was much more explicit. Like people would talk about being racist before the Civil Rights Movement. After it, white people classified racism as something that is done to people, and that only bad people do it. And this is a huge issue, and probably the thing that I'm taking away the most from this book. Because making racism bad, that when you call someone a racist, it'll be like a character assassination. So if you make racism equal bad person, and you call someone a racist, you're basically that person's going to interpret that as you calling them a bad person, and they will put all their energy in being defensive and deflecting what was said to them instead of trying to learn. It makes it virtually impossible to talk about racism with many white people, and this is very important. The good-bad binary made the average white person unable to understand the complexity of racism. White people see racism like murder, something you commit, instead of the social issue that it is. We need to stop thinking racism is committed by individuals who are bad people. Good people can have racist ideas and say racist things and do racist things as well. White people put themselves on the good side, on the not racist side, and then they completely forget about race. And I'll have to admit that that's probably something I've done. Okay, I'm not racist. I'm good. I'll go over here on this side of the not racist, and then we stereotype the people that are racist. We stereotype them as ignorant, old, Southern, and I think, well, I'm not any of those things, so I'm on the good side. And it's not about good and bad. It's about the societal, institutional, systematic view of race in our country. And it's not going to stop just by putting ourselves in a category of good versus bad. So when you're called out, you can't respond with white fragility, like defensiveness, deflecting. You have to seek to understand why it is they're saying what they're saying to you, and try to understand and try to see where they're coming from. We must stop seeing racism as something only bad people do. We, all white people, do it. It needs to be addressed and talked about, and it's extremely hard to address and talk about it if we believe racism is only for bad people. Because when we talk about it, then that we get defensive because we think people are calling us bad people. So this is the biggest hurdle that I have to overcome, and I feel like a lot of white people have to overcome, is changing our definition of what it is to be racist and racism in general. So that's what I read this morning, and I'll be back tomorrow for a little bit more from White Fragility.